Kia ora koutou katoa. Haere mai ki tēnei Eco Church wānanga tātou. Ko Amy Ross taku ingoa, ko Pawatahanui Parish taku wharekarakia. Hello everybody, a very warm welcome to the first Eco Church wānanga in our 3-part series. My name's Amy Ross. I'm a member of Pawatahanui Parish in Northern Porirua, and I'm the Regional Community Coordinator for the Eco Church project in the Greater Wellington region. Eco Church is a project of Arosha Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we are so excited to have you here tonight to be part of this series, to be part of these discussions and learning a bit more about what Eco Church is. Let's get into it. These are the 3 sessions that we're offering online. Some of you will be familiar with some of this material, which is fantastic because I know that a few friends are joining us tonight. But for some of you, it will be new. And so we're really excited to share with you a bit about what Eco Church is, how the vision that we have for this beautiful movement growing around Aotearoa, and all the wonderful stories that are emerging from churches taking action to care for creation. Okay, let me outline what we'll be doing tonight together. We'll be hearing a little bit of background, as I've mentioned, and a few more introductions. We will see some examples of Eco Churches in action. We'll think about why Eco Church is an important movement, why it's an important network to be part of, and how it came about. We'll actually invite you to participate in some discussion around that. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. And then we'll touch on the biblical mandate for caring for the environment, caring for creation, see a few more examples of Eco Churches in action, and briefly introduce the suite of resources that have been developed for Eco Church. You will be hearing more about them in future sessions, but we'll introduce them tonight. So now I would really love to introduce Crystal, who is the founder and director of Arosha Aotearoa, New Zealand, and she will tell us a little bit more about what happened when Arosha started and how did it lead to Eco Church. Over to you, Crystal.
Kia ora tātou, ko karioi te maunga, ko wainui te awa, no Netherlands ahau, and no Raglan ahau. Ko Crystal toku ingoa. Tēnā tātou katoa. Great to meet you all. My name is Crystal. Like I very simply said, I'm actually from the Netherlands, but Raglan's my home. Whangaroa, just here on the west coast, just south of Auckland. Really great to be here. Like we were just saying before, it's always a bit strange still, like having these big gatherings on Zoom, but also so special to be here and to be able to meet like this and have people from all over the country join us and save all that carbon in the process. So thank you so much for joining us. So like Amy said, like just a little introduction to Arosha. We started out in about 2007, a small group of us, mainly based in the Waikato, and there's a few faces on the screen that I just saw, the Parmentons and that were part of those very early conversations, and just a bunch of us that had some experience of Arosha overseas, and felt really inspired to see something like that here in New Zealand. And yeah, so we started those initial conversations just about what would Arosha look like in New Zealand, and what do we want to achieve, and lots of those conversations included like, how do we engage the church? Well, I hate to say it, but the church wasn't that interested in us. They kind of thought we were maybe a bunch of eco nuts, and they couldn't often see the relevance of, faith and environment, and why, this had anything to do with God, or why Christians should be involved. But luckily, there was a bunch of people that that did, understand that and did believe that, and didn't give up despite perhaps some discouragement along the way. There was also lots of positive things, and there was such a amazing feeling of like, hey, we're in this together and let's unite. And very early on, we had a conference where we had about 100 people from around the country join us here in Raglan, who were excited about the thought of something like a Rocha or Christians doing being involved in the environmental movement, but having a unique voice is that it's God inspired, and that it's something that God would want us to be involved in, because this is his amazing, beautiful earth. So we actually had local groups established across the country, and I always call them kind of the forest and bird of A Rocha. It's those really, really keen people that were there, often a little bit disillusioned with the church, but we're out there doing this stuff, and so enthusiastically started local groups, and either started their own projects, whether it be planting and wetland restoration and sharing this message as well. And also just getting involved with other conservation groups and turning up. I remember a story in Dunedin where Selwyn Yeoman and a bunch of volunteers turned up, and they outnumbered the other group that they were helping out. And they were in fact a real blessing to other conservation, groups and projects. And that's pretty much a template of how we've worked for the last 10 to 15 years, is that we've joined and partnered with other organizations, other people who are passionate about this work, passionate about doing something in their local community, their local backyard. The other day, my daughter said to me, we were out in the bush checking some traps, and she said, "Mum, I was born to be in nature." And I thought that was so telling. It was like, yes, as Christians and as people, we are born to be in nature, and God inspires us to take care of it. And that's just so encouraging for no matter what age you are. And she's 8. So that was just lovely to hear, and just knowing that when we live out what God has called us to do, we can do so much awesome stuff. But anyway, I'm probably talking too long. We did then start also the Karioi project. If you're interested in what A Rocha has done there, we've built up a big community conservation project here in Raglan. We now have about 10 people working on our staff and about 130 volunteers. If you want to know more about that story, there's a 12-minute film on the Karioi website that you can have a look at. A few years ago, more and more we noticed that churches were connecting and reaching out to us, and people were enthused about the thought of getting their churches involved in doing more for the environment, and just reflecting on what that would mean for them. And so we during the lockdown, actually, we put together a New Zealand version of Eco Church, and we've had a template in a sense from the UK, and they've got hundreds of churches there signed up, and we thought, hey, if they can do it, surely we can too. And here we are with quite a few churches already signed up, and we've just been so absolutely humbled and enthused by the response we've had from churches all across the country. And here you are, our very first wānanga, talking about what Eco Church means. And we've had all sorts of other activities online, of course, as well, because of lockdowns. But great to see you all, and thank you for joining. It's really exciting kind of seeing Eco Church grow as a movement, and we're equally as inspired by you as hopefully you are by seeing all these other faces online. So thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Fantastic. It's really my privilege and joy to work with Crystal. She's fantastic, as is the rest of the A Rocha team, and some of you are here tonight. So yes, let me just share my screen again. It's good to hear a bit about the roots of A Rocha Aotearoa and how Eco Church came out of that. So you can see up here, the project goal for Eco Church is church communities across the country actively caring for this earth. And I know that many of you will already be doing that in your communities, and that is, as Crystal said, super inspiring for us. So we're really about networking people together and inspiring and enthusing those who want to go further in their journey, and those who are just starting off at the beginning of taking action as a church community. You can read the focus there. Just to let you know a little bit about me, as a regional coordinator. I support churches to take action and to access the resources, the growing suite of resources that belong to Eco Church that have emerged. And I got into it because I originally I spent many years studying sustainability, climate governance, and actually the political side of climate advocacy, environmental management, and I was working for a few different organisations, community and Christian and secular organisations who were trying to take action in this space. And in the end, I concluded that personal private action at a household level, obviously that's vital, but it can be really hard work and an uphill battle, and we can't expect personal private household level action environmentally to be the only action that is taken. Environmental advocacy at a government level, super important. We all know that that's where the biggest differences are made. Businesses and organisations can make huge differences as well, positively for the environment. But for me, it was so wonderful to see church communities as that smaller local scale group working together to provide inspiration for the individuals in their midst and in their local communities who, may not belong to the church, but just be connected to their environmental efforts. And so I do believe churches are a perfect scale for taking environmental action. So I hope you join me in that enthusiasm, and I'm sure that's why many of you are here tonight. And just to give you a sample of how this movement is growing around the country, we have 28 churches registered, but I can tell you that we are in conversation, our small team is in conversation with many, many more churches who would like to take steps to care for the environment in their community. So watch this space, basically. The 3 denominational partners there, we have the Auckland and Wellington Anglican Diocese, and the Presbyterian Church of New Zealand has committed to being a denominational partner as well, and we're in conversation with lots of different denominations. It's inspiring to be part of something ecumenical where people are working together. And here's a flavour of what that looks like in one church.
Tēnā rā tata katoa, ko James Beck tēnei, ko Kashmir New Life tōku wharikarakia, and we are stoked to be part of the Eco Church community and network. Our little church is passionate about getting people excited about and engaged with environmentalism and taking care of our beautiful tai ao. And so it's great to be part of a network of other churches to learn from what they are doing and to be able to share some of the things that we're doing to be Christians on a mission to care for creation. So kia ora, it's lovely to be part of the community.
That was James Beck from Kashmir New Life in Christchurch, and their church has taken some bold steps. They are involved in a little restoration project where they go once a month as a church community to plant trees and to weed and protect those trees, and that has been very inspiring. You can read more about it on the Eco Church website.
Hi, I'm Reverend Annette from Tawa Anglicans, and we recently signed up as an Eco Church. One of the things I really love about it is that people in our congregation, as we've talked about it, have realised that things that they're already passionate about are part of what we're talking about. So we've been having a lot on our Facebook conversations around things like composting or tips and tricks of what people use. So that's generated a lot of community, and it's been fantastic from that perspective. I've also really liked that it's connected us with some of our parishioners who do things in the community. So we have a lot connected with the community garden. We've got other people who are passionate about EV, and we've got a lot of people who are building houses and talking about different materials that they could be using. And what we're finding is by using Eco Church and using that material, these conversations start connecting into that, and they start to interweave with people's faith. We also find that it's a really good point of evangelism. So sometimes people are a bit funny about talking about their faith, but if they can connect it with something that people are already passionate about, for example, our planet, animals, the environment, how they live, how they move, and what they're doing with those resources, we find it's a really good way of inroads to be talking about why we do it, and therefore people are more open to talking about matters of faith. So I would really recommend that if you're considering it as a parish, that this is something that you should get on board with. It doesn't become another committee, it's not another thing that's difficult. What it does is it highlights and celebrates a passion that people already have, and it's something that is really at the heart of who we are as Christians.
It was good to have a sample anyway of a couple of churches who are underway with the Eco Church journey. That's Tawa Anglican, the second one, and they're based just out of Wellington and part of the Greater Wellington region. And yeah, they've taken quite a few actions. You'll see a few more photos later. Okay, so we say about Eco Church, it is ordinary people doing great things, and when more than one household comes together, amazing things can be achieved in churches. We all need a bit of extra inspiration as we work to care for the environment, because it's a lot of bad news out there as well as some good news stories, but working together we can keep each other going and inspire deeper and further actions. Now I invite you to write in the chat box, what is your church like? You can just highlight a couple of key interests or concerns that you're bringing to the group tonight. We won't be answering these specifically, but we'd love to hear from you, and it will help us one another to gauge where your passion is, what has brought you to express an interest in Eco Church. Thanks. Actually, as you do that, I will just flick through a few more photos from Tawa Anglican that you can have a look at. That's their main vicar and their associate vicar, and one of the members of the vestry, the Anglican decision-making body at that congregational level, who signed up about a year ago now, more than a year ago, and it's been a real privilege to journey with these guys as they've met together and formed a group and planned activities and taken some action. You'll hear more about this later this evening, but just a photo of their zero waste parakore workshop, which took place recently. So waste reduction and management is one area, or diversion from landfill is one area of Eco Church. There are many different parts, but this is a very, very practical way that churches can take action. This is this is my friend who is actually here this evening, I think, but I won't embarrass her too much. She has all the power. No, she's in that wonderful church position where she can influence the purchasing policy. I won't show the videos because our volume was low tonight, but just to give you a sample of another change that churches can make is purchasing more environmentally friendly cleaning materials and materials that they use in the bathrooms, toilet paper, in the kitchens, hand towels, all sorts of things. There we go. Now, have we got some bits and pieces in the chat box? Do feel free to pop up a couple of things about your church if you'd like to. It's good to see some of these areas of interest. So someone's mentioned that they're part of a small congregation with a wide variety of backgrounds and ideas. And I think that's fantastic. That is definitely what we often see. And the beauty of this environmental journey is that all different passions and ideas and skills can be integrated into the changes we need to make. Over time, becoming part of a low-carbon community will involve addressing areas of travel, of transport, of energy generation, consumption, food generation and consumption, waste. The list is absolutely endless, and so I love seeing the variety of ideas that people bring as they go forward in this. All right, so just moving on, what is the Eco Church kaupapa? You can see there we aim for it to be very grassroots, or flax roots as we say in Aotearoa, volunteer-led. Because it's using local resources that have been selected by the church communities, by what is often a small group in the church that grows, it is sustainable over time. And there are grants available for those churches who wish to bite off bigger projects. You know, there are community grants for environmental activities, for climate change mitigation or adaptation. And yet much of what can be done is free and just requires that little bit of time or some deliberate choices, and that's awesome. We aim to respect mana whenua. We're aware that this is an important part of what it means to be people of faith, caring for the environment in our local areas. And we work in partnership all the time with different groups, and we encourage churches to reach out and look at what's already going on in their communities and to support those activities. We don't need to reinvent the wheel in a lot of these cases. We just need to support the wonderful activities that are going on. And here at the bottom, I've listed what we in the Eco Church project have highlighted as our response to the biblical challenges. These are what motivates us, really. Living a faithful life, following Jesus, loving our neighbours in a resource-limited world. So there's a social justice element. And reflecting and protecting the glory of God. And this is where we all know that being outdoors in creation, or just not even outdoors, just understanding the manifestation of God and the Holy Spirit within the natural world, within things that bring beauty, that give us joy, that teach us about the character of God, that is such a key part of Christian discipleship. And so we believe that taking more deliberate and focused action to care for the environment will just bring us closer to God over time as we journey and understand his heart for the non-human creation. So I'm now going to invite you guys to share a little bit more. So we've done a bit in the chat box, but it's important to have space to hear from you about why it is that you think we should be responding to the environmental crises. I think of them often in triplicate, sadly. Now I'm thinking about climate change, biodiversity loss, and the pollution problems that we have, particularly plastics pollution, but other types of pollution as well. And so what is it that gives you your theological motivation to respond to these challenges? So we'll now invite you to join breakout rooms. If you haven't done this before in Zoom, it should be pretty intuitive and straightforward. I'll stop sharing my screen there. So you join one of the breakout rooms that are available, and then you have 10 minutes for a conversation in your group in answer to that question. Why should churches take environmental action from a theological perspective? And I'll give you a notification when it's nearly time to rejoin the plenary group, all of us together. Welcome back. I think we've got everyone back with us, so fantastic. I hope you're able to have a good but brief discussion there, I know, in the breakout rooms. I'm going to run through the breakout groups numerically. So if you remember the number of the one that you were part of, I'll invite one person from each group to just briefly share just a few sentences really about what were a few key points that emerged from your discussion. So breakout room 1.
I think that was us. I'm not sorry. I mean, any other takers? Must be us. Kia ora koutou. My name's Jimmy. So we had North Islanders. So yeah, all the way from the top down to the south of the North Island, and being able to shine a light. So yeah, that being Christians, it's difficult sometimes to talk with people about things. So yeah, very polarizing talking with people about faith, environment. It's quite polarizing. But also a responsibility there, yeah, because we are of the land and we're in the land, so yeah, we really do need to be able to look after what we have, but also it's quite uplifting talking about this because we're passionate about whether it's environment or faith or what have you. It makes a change from other discussions people are having. And yeah, sometimes it's a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation that we're passionate about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim, from St. Mary's in Whitby. Yes, absolutely. It is sometimes a difficult conversation, isn't it? But one that you can share a passion with people and as you say, shine a light, be a great witness as well in the world. Thank you, Group 1. So Group 2.
Yeah, it's me, Robin, from Parapram Baptist. Yeah, we had people from, I think, as far away as Thames, and then quite a few of us from around our area. We traversed why people got into this. Some of it comes from personal drive or personal experience. Some people were early to the game, some late to the game. I think we all recognise that God created absolutely everything. So from a theological perspective, you know, it's not just people he's concerned about. It's every part of what he made. I think we late in the time when Crystal joined us, we realised that it needs groups like yourselves to have got this kind of thing off the ground. It wouldn't naturally happen. The church has been a late comer to the environmental movement. I think even globally, we've unusually for church in the history where we've often driven a lot of change. We've been quite late to this kind of concept, but groups like Arosha are now, you know, putting this on the map, and we're very grateful for that.
Thank you, Robin from Parapara Umu Baptist and Group 2. Exactly, that's encouraging for us to hear. But you're right that in some cases Christians have been late to the party, but in some ways it's always been an integral part of theology, just sort of the Protestant separation sometimes of the material and the spiritual led to downplaying that. We'll talk a bit more about that later, downplaying the sort of overemphasizing the spiritual and downplaying the material, despite God being present and caring about all of it. So Group 3, let's hear from you.
Is Group 3 happy for me to talk? I did an awful lot of talking.
Lovely to see you, Irene.
Thank you. We started off with the whole Genesis creation theology and God making us stewards. We talked about God so loved the world, and one of our number was knew that was the cosmos. It doesn't mean humans. God so loved the whole world. God made everything good, not just humans. So everything has its place. Some people talked about feeling close to God when we're in the natural world. And we talked about social justice being a hook for some people to be part of Eco Church. I might have missed some things out, and I'm happy for others to pipe up. We did talk quite a lot about what that meant in practice as well. I'm sorry, Amy.
No, that's great. Thank you. No. Yeah, practice as well as the motivation. Brilliant. I'm glad you could cover both. Thank you, Irene. Thanks, Group 3. It's great to hear. Group 4.
Kia ora. I think we were Group 4, and very much echoing a lot of what Group 3 talked about, actually, in terms of the creation story and God pronouncing everything good day after day, and how integral that is really for us, therefore seeing it as good, celebrating it and protecting it. We talked about the simple commandment of Jesus: love God, love neighbor, and love yourself, and that it's just becoming increasingly glaringly obvious that we really can't do that without loving and caring for creation. And then not so much around the theological sort of justifications, but just wider discussions around that we had around what it means to be perhaps in aging churches, or with youth coming through, taking the reins on some things, but also in those aging churches that a lot of people have lived through times of, you know, Great Depression or soon afterwards, the aftermath, and actually have a lot of wisdom and practical experience to offer in terms of the way perhaps we need to be living. Trying to think what else. There was quite a lot of ground covered in all sorts of different directions, really. Oh yeah, I think maybe one final point was because of the challenge of sort of trying to take environmental action on an individual or household level, the huge pro that it is to do it in a communal way that church offers, and
that's quite unique, actually. There's not a lot of groups in the community necessarily that offer it in the same sort of community that a church offers it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
There are other groups doing environmental action, but yeah, probably without the same necessarily the same sort of community ethos that a church will have. Yeah, hopefully that summarizes our group pretty well. Hopefully I've done justice, Group 4.
Thank you, Ollie, and thank you, Group 4. I think you've touched on some really valuable things there, and you mentioned how different generations, different age groups experience the environmental crises and the need to respond, or what they've lived through, some of the older generations, and obviously how our younger people experience what they read and hear in the news today and how they respond. And so, as you say, that it's quite unique to have that intergenerational fellowship, the relationships that we have, which can go very deep in churches sometimes as we work together on this. So I do think that's very unique for churches. It's exciting. Okay, thank you. Group, what are you up to? 5.
I think we might be 5. Not exactly sure. I'll just jump in.
Go for it.
Good.
Hi, Anna.
Kelly's nodding. Great. Hi. So yeah, at first we were just a bit stumped because we're like, it's just so obvious, it's self-evident. But then obviously that's not enough of a rationale.
I love it. That's the first.
But yeah, we were like, it's just, we've been living this for so long. Like some of us have been doing this for a long time, and just we're at second nature now. So then it gets harder to explain to someone who that's not their priority. But yeah, at the foundation, I guess God cares for creation, and so his followers care for creation. It's just sort of as simple as that, really. And someone else mentioned that reciprocal, like the earth provides for us, and so we need to give back to the earth and care for the earth. Something we didn't talk about, but I thought later is it's actually a quote I wrote down the other day in my book. Been reading Wendell Berry and getting very inspired, half sad reading him. But he talks about despair and hope, and he's just got this amazing quote, which I think kind of sums up one of the reasons why we try and live it out practically with eco-churches. So if that's all right, I'll just read it. Please. So despair is assuming the objectionable is inevitable, so the essential work is neglected. How can we have something better if we do not imagine it? How can we imagine it if we do not hope for it? How can we hope for it if we do not attempt to realize it? So that's, if we do have this hope, and if we do have it, then let's give people a picture, let's imagine it, and start actually living it out so people can see it and imagine it and feel and smell it, what it could look like. Yeah.
Awesome. Anna, thank you. That's a great quote by Wendell Berry, and I'm sure many of you guys might have read some of Wendell Berry. As you say, it's sort of that beautiful mixture of grief and hope, and that is important for people who care about this, deeply, like we do live between grief and hope. It's something that a few authors I've been reading recently write about, and so yet we're in the now but not yet theologically, so we understand the work that Christ has done, but we're also waiting for the final redemption. In that space, it is about holding that place and imagining what it can look like and living into that. Awesome, thank you. So we had Group 6 next.
I think that was me against my better judgment, so the others can speak up as they see fit. We touched, Anna, where you got to, actually. One of our correspondents considerably emphasized hope, and the hope that Christians have, hope for a better outcome, better world, better relationships between people. What will be the significant impact of climate change is its huge impact on the whole of humanity. Not just people in low-lying areas, and not only the poor, who will be significantly greater disadvantaged than us, most of us here. And therefore, our care for the whole of humanity as part of the creation that we benefit and enjoy is going to be irreparably changed, and negatively for those who currently inhabit the earth. And so that is a very significant decisions that we're taking or not making at the moment. We had someone from Pacifica, and they're so in touch with the environment in their countries that when they move to New Zealand, the country, the climate, the nature seems more remote, and therefore she wondered if that was part of some of the reluctance within Pacifica congregations to take action as quickly as some others are taking. I can't comment on that, but that was her view. But certainly I think hope and the impact upon everyone means that this is a really serious attitude. And I like Ollie's comment about churches being able to be a voice in the community and to pull together different parts of the community to start making a difference and to start raising a voice, not only within our communities, but also politically. Because let's face it, there are a great deal of momentum facing the wrong way at the moment. Business, politically, momentum of lobby groups and the like. So there is a significant battle ahead. Others can chip in if they wish to. Richard, etc.
Yep, we've got time for one more quick comment from your group if anybody just needs to add that extra there. It's a very deep and meaningful well, what you've covered there, Ian from Tawa Union. It's lovely to see you again. What you've covered there is comprehensive and really important. And yeah, thank you also for highlighting the advocacy side of things too. Otherwise, we will just we're just going to move on.
In the final group, Amy.
Oh, sorry, one more group.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave anyone out. Oh dear. Apologies. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Kia ora. Greetings from 2 Wellington Central churches and some Featherstonians and an Aucklander. We had good conversations. Just wanted to say thanks for the question. Great. We really enjoyed the question that you would want to start that way with what's our theological background, our basis for this. Something that we can probably skip over quite quickly. So kia ora. We all kind of touched on the fact of creation, that it was all made. I like the question because I think it invites us as churches to think what unique contribution might we make to the environmental movement. Clearly, it's widespread. So, is there anything unique we have to say? I like to think it's to do with hope, as was just said, and maybe centered on Christ, who took on flesh not only during the incarnation, but that the incarnation continues through resurrection and into ascension. The fact that humanity is now in the life of God through Christ, and by extension, creation. I think it was Tom Wright who says we're saved not as souls, but as wholes. And that extends beyond just humanity to all of creation being drawn into this. So that our work might be a participation in what God is ultimately doing, rather than something that we're trying to do to save a dying planet, but rather a joining in on something that God had always intended and has graciously shared with us by His Spirit. So and then we talked a lot of practicals as well. We have 2 inner city Wellington churches. We have an inner city Auckland church, and asking the question, what does it look like for church communities that have people from a wide parish, so rather than maybe a localized suburban parish. Those are questions for us going forward. And I'd also just like to say hello to John Jellyman. Hi, nice to see you.
Little shout out there. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Wellington Central Baptist Church and those involved in the group there. It's lovely that some people have met together in groups to be part of this. And totally, tautoko, what you've just said there about the getting the theological imperative, the reason why we're doing all of this, the reason why Eco Church matters, front and centre at the start is a good place from which to take all of our actions. And that you had some really powerful thoughts there, and including joining in on what God is already doing. For me, that honestly, that is what keeps me going, you know, when all of this feels a little bit too overwhelming from time to time. Sometimes you know too much, and you also know that no matter how much action you take, you know, the balance between what you can do and what needs to happen is so great. But knowing that we're joining in with what God is already doing, that his heart for this is even bigger than anything we could ever generate in terms of love and passion, is so powerful. So really appreciate that from our final group there. I'm glad I didn't accidentally shut you off. Sorry. So thank you, Iris. Now I'm just going to share my screen again. You guys have covered a lot of the different points that I was hoping would come up. But I did want to basically re-emphasize things. This is really my passion, is to, within Eco Church actually, we have 5 different categories. You'll hear a lot more about those next week. But within the self-assessment and other approaches that church take. But of those 5, 4 of them are very practical, and one of them is focusing on leadership, worship, and teaching, and how we can integrate some of the things that have just been mentioned tonight into the leadership, worship, and teaching within our churches. Much of it may already be there, but it's linking it to our environmental response today. And so it's great that that came up tonight. From most of what I'm about to say, you've already covered and you've already discussed in your groups. I mean, I was talking to a university chaplain the other day, and she said to me, "Oh, it's so important. This stuff is really important, because essentially, what is the good news today?" When I'm talking to anyone who's under 40, she's saying, "What is the good news today?" People are keenly aware of what the world will be looking like in the future as climate change is exacerbated, and some of the trajectories that we're on with biodiversity continue, unfortunately. What is the good news today? And so for her, she was highlighting the importance of finding out what Jesus' death and resurrection and God's love and the narrative of the biblical story, how that provided the hope for the future for all of us, and also purpose in our lives today. So you've mentioned the intrinsic value of creation. That non-human creation is valuable to God, totally independent of humans. So one of my favorite parts in the book of Job is, towards the end, when Job has been speaking to God and about he's been on his journey of suffering, and then God is responding to him in those later chapters, and he mentions the wild donkeys, the ones that no human will ever see, and he says, well, those wild donkeys, and in their place of total wilderness, I watch how they roam, how they give birth, how they feed, and it's sort of like God was saying, I love, it doesn't matter whether humans have any engagement with parts of creation that they don't see. I've made them almost for the joy of it for me, and they are such an important part of this entire world, this cosmos. And we know all the way through actually the biblical story there are different examples of God's love for non-human creation, and if that's not reason enough, caring for the masterpiece that the artist has created, then but we have many more reasons, so we'll continue. There's a theologian in the UK that has been very helpful for me and within the Arosha movement, called Dave Bookless. Ironically, you won't forget this, he's written several books, but his name is Dave Bookless, and if you look him up, he describes the relationship between God, humanity, and the non-human world as being almost triangular. And when the relationship between one of those 2 components falters, then the other ones are affected. And when the relationship is improved between God and humanity, for example, the non-human world also benefits. And that is a theological thread we can see woven throughout the Old Testament and the New. So do explore that one. I'm just giving you, I'm just touching on these things that you'll find so much material and beautiful resources around with regard to eco-theology, but they are an important part of informing the work we do in this space. In Colossians 1, 15 to 23, you know, this is where I'm just going to share another screen with you, maybe. I don't know if I can do that. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. So this is the part where we're thinking about Jesus Christ and his ongoing involvement, the nature of who God is, of Jesus, who Jesus is, how that is holding together all of creation beyond just human beings. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And for later on in verse 19, it says, "For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, in Jesus, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross." And I just find this really helpful because it reminds us that the work that Christ did on the cross was so important to more than just human beings, you know. And some theologians describe John 3:16, "For God so loved the cosmos, the whole world, that he sent his only son," you know. So whenever we talk about the good news of Jesus Christ, which we do all the time in churches, let's remember that that good news is for so much more. And when we lose heart as people who care about the environmental issues, you know, let's remember that that work was done and is ongoing and will be completed in times to come. That leads me to eschatology. So thinking about the future, the promises we have in the Bible. In Romans, we read that creation is groaning now, waiting for a future redemption. We are in that space the theologians call the now, but not yet. So we have glimpses of the kingdom of heaven that we can see in the world around us. And, you know, some of you may actually experience those glimpses of the kingdom of heaven when you see, you know, your fellow believers working together in unity, you know, overcoming their differences and sharing the load of caring for their local environment or the global environment. I hope that you do see that. And then just finally on our biblical mandate, social justice. Many of you mentioned this. With the effects of climate change becoming so much more urgent and widespread, although I must admit it was many years ago that I was arrested, almost, you could say, by the urgency of responding to climate change because of its manifestation in developing countries or in the majority world. And so it's becoming impossible to ignore that, you know, we can't live our nice protected lives just because we're in a country that the effects of climate change might not be quite so front and centre, although they're catching up with us now. But the mandate has been there for a long time when we think of God's heart for justice and applying that globally. Okay, so we've touched on the biblical mandate. You guys have discussed it. Now let's look at another example of eco-church, just a few little examples of eco-churches in action. Because I promised in this first wānanga session that we would be inspiring as well with what some churches are up to. So here's one that I'm reasonably familiar with.
Hi, I'm Dan Ross. I'm the vicar here in the parish of Pawatahanui. What I love about eco-church is the way in which it brings so much life and dynamism to a church community as people realise that they're able to express their love for God and for God's creation in complementary ways. And the life that brings to our parish has been awesome.
Some of you might find that guy a little bit familiar. He just so happens to be my husband. Easier to co-opt the ones who you know into making videos for you, but we have had some videos sent in from other cool eco churches around the place. Couldn't help but profile Dan. He's the vicar at our parish, and basically we've found that we've actually been in 3 different eco churches as a couple, and so 2 of those were in the UK because as Crystal mentioned at the beginning, the eco-church movement has been present in some other countries, and it actually started in the UK. So while I was living over there, I was able to be an advocate, like many of you will be in your churches, for taking environmental action. So Dan and I, who you just saw, we've been in 3 different eco churches now, each of which has looked quite different in its expression of this, all of which has been wonderful. So I'll show you a couple more photos. Different churches take different approaches according to their capacities and the passions of the people who are volunteering their time. And so I do often get asked, what is the most impactful thing that we can do as an eco church? And it's a very good question. And in later sessions in this wānanga series, I'll go into some more depth. I've sort of come up with a rough matrix of ways that we can consider, or factors we can consider balancing when we make our choices for taking environmental action as a church. But you know, there are many different factors at play. But the variety is part of the beauty of it. And sometimes it's not just, let me see if I can just skip forward. There you go. Now, somebody here tonight might actually recognize himself in that photo as well. I'm not sure if I won't embarrass you too much, Guy, but I hope you don't mind me sharing. This is one of the expressions of eco church. We've seen predator control taking off, which is wonderful on so many levels, protecting our native trees and biodiversity and bird life, but also in the longer term, that's also part of addressing climate change. So this group was trained by Wellington Regional Council, I think, gave some support and provided some traps. Just to give you some examples, many churches do working bees together if they have land that they can care for either under their church ownership or in a neighbouring green space that they'd like to contribute their time to, getting stuck in. And involving children in this is obviously fantastic. So James, who you saw right at the beginning, a little video clip from Christchurch, they are very intergenerational about their working bee approach. And so every month they invite the kids to come with them and take their little mini wheelbarrows, and they have some great examples. And I know Anna Baird in Masterton and many other churches have found this to be an inspiring way of talking about environmental issues with the younger people. I think having a notice board is great. It gives everyone a chance to keep up to date with what's going on. This group were doing a beach cleanup, a popular activity for some churches in our region, actually. This is a harvest festival, so we're encouraging churches to consider doing these, to consider the impact of their food growth, consumption, waste, to talk about it, to thank God for the provision of food, to go a bit deeper into reflecting theologically on what that means. And that's something that can be done annually. Some churches may like to tie it in with matariki in Aotearoa. It depends a little bit on where you are in the country and when your harvest comes up. But getting people growing more is always fantastic. And I've just noted down a few other examples here that are some of my favourite ones that I've enjoyed seeing over the years and being part of. There are so many. As I say, next week we will be digging deeper into where do you start? You know, what's working for your church? The ideas never run dry. You might think, oh, well, we've done about 5 things. That's probably, you know, that might be it really. I can't think of anything else. But once you get talking to one another and to the Eco Church Network, you'll find the ideas are endless. Okay. That's enough from me. Now I'm going to hand over to Iris, and she will be telling you a little bit about the resources available in the network. Now, Iris, I just can't sing her praises highly enough. She holds so much in her head with regard to Arosha and Eco Church, but if you haven't communicated with her yet, you probably will. She's in touch with everyone all around the country. Go ahead, Iris.
Kia ora, I'll just do a little mihi first. Tēnā koutou ko aku mai nei. E mihi ana ki ngā mena manapanua I tipu ake au ki marehia e noho ana au ki whanganui atara ko tēnei taku mihi ki ngā tangata whenua o te rohe nei. Ke Arosha ahau e mahi ana ko Iris toku ingoa no reira tēnā koutou katoa. So yeah, I just mentioned that I'm from Malaysia originally, but I live in Wellington now, and I work for Arosha Aotearoa, and I do lots of behind the scenes work for Eco Church, or the operational stuff. And one of my jobs is to develop resources and partnerships and tools for the Eco Church project. And that's why Amy is getting me to give a little teaser about some of the things that you can find on our website. So the EcoChurch website, this is our main central hub where you can find everything that we're, organizing and offering and making available to EcoChurches. So like, as you can see here, we have like stories, resources, speakers, how to get started, and lots more. So the next few slides will just show you some of the things that you can find. And so from now to the next wānanga, this is your chance to go and explore the website and have a teaser of what's available and bring all your questions to the next wānanga. So Amy, next slide, please. Yeah, so the self-assessment worksheet. So this is one of the key starting points for EcoChurch teams. They get together and talk about the 5 categories, which Amy mentioned, and she'll elaborate a bit more in the next wānanga. So it's very useful too to figure out where your church is at and where you'd like to head and where your strengths are. We have stories that we feature from eco-churches and also churches. They are not quite eco-churches yet, but have lots of stories to share. So they share their stories with us and hopefully inspire you to take action in those areas too. So you can filter the stories based on categories and keywords. So you can look for stuff that you're interested in and look for examples of what you could do too. So resources, we create lots of resources on all sorts of topics, and we try to be as comprehensive as possible to cover all aspects of church life. But most recently, we've added a resource page on Matariki. We've added a page on rural eco-theology, and we also added a page on eco-anxiety and well-being. And we're continuing to explore more topics. One of the topics I'm working on now is end-of-life resources and how to be sustainable in that area. So yeah, if you have an area that you want to explore in your church, write to us, talk to us, or if you have tips that you want to share, write to us too. The Zero Waste program for churches, that's one of our program offerings that lots of churches is actually taking on right now. And you can see some photos there from workshops that we've had, basically helping churches to minimize their waste. And we do this in partnership with our partner, Parakore. So for children and youth, we partner with Adventure Specialties Trust and Scripture Union to offer camps for Tamariki and Nangatahi. So we have wilderness journeys, which are 11-day wilderness journeys, tramping, cycling, canoeing, and basically developing leadership skills and eco-theology skills. So basically creating a new generation of Taitiaki. And the Sustain Camp in Raglan, that's just for the younger age group and not so hardcore, but yeah, basically exposing and connecting them with nature. So for Sunday schools, we have the Creation Connection series. It's written by Elsa Keeling. She's from Godly Play. So the resources is a very flexible, open-ended resource, which is basically about helping children to connect to nature and in doing so, learn to love and care for it. For small groups, we have the Rich Living series, and we have 5 topics in that series at the moment, which is shown on the slide. So you can get these resources in printed copy, or you can just go to the Arosha website and download the PDF. You can use it in your small groups or use it for your personal study. And some of the other tools that we're currently working on, the 360 Carbon is a carbon calculator, especially for churches, that we're currently trying to customize for New Zealand emission factors. And we're doing this in partnership with an Arosha partner, Climate Steward. And as part of the Arosha Worldwide family, we also have links to EcoChurch resources from the UK and also to Arosha's sort of hub for theological resources for churches, and that's called Arosha at Your Service. At the moment, it's going to be rebranded to be a central hub of resources for churches. Yep, and what we also do in the background is we send out lots of communication. So we have the EcoChurch e-news, that we send out quarterly with stories and events and resources. We have the Korero series that we do it every 2 months or so. So in April, we had this session on reading your church building project. In July, quite recently, we had a Zoom session on supporting children and youth in ecological discipleship, and that was really well attended and very inspiring. So coming up in September, we have an online Zoom for how eco-churches can engage with manapreneur. And in November, because of the UN Plastics Treaty that's coming up, we're going to have a focus on that for churches and how we can engage in advocacy in that area. And lastly, another resource that we're working in the background is to develop an intro video, a short country video that you can play to your church congregation to share about eco-church. So that's in the pipeline too. So that's it.
Thank you, Iris. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Iris?
No, I think that's pretty comprehensive of what people can explore between now and the next wānanga. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Do check these out, and a huge congratulations to Iris and others who have been involved in the development of these resources. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to engage with them, and yeah, I just cannot. I take my hat off to you, Iris, for all the background work that you do to help to maintain these wonderful resources for our churches. Okay. Oh yeah, we will make these recordings available for the 3 of these wānanga sessions as well, because we're aware there's quite a few people who have registered but are not able to attend, or you might like to share it the link later with others in your church community. All right, now on to Q&A time. Let me just check where we're at. We've got about 5 minutes or so to just open up the floor to those of you who would like to put a question forward. Might not be that I can answer it, I'll do my best, but others in the team might. I would like to actually briefly introduce another one of our colleagues, Sylvia, who's here tonight, I think, because I wasn't sure if she was going to be here, and it's wonderful that she is. She's essentially a local group leader and doing similar work to what I do, but in Christchurch. So she supports the Christchurch churches who are eco-churches and those who are on the journey to get there and become one as well. So she might also like to answer any questions that come up. Feel free, Sylvia. Please just unmute yourself. Sorry, Iris. Yep.
In the chat, there's a question from Rachel. What's the split of eco-churches of suburban compared to rural?
Great question. Yeah. I think, I mean, you actually might be able to answer this one better, Iris, but I think at the moment we have mainly urban churches or suburban churches, and there are some that are more rural or semi-rural, but probably it's weighted in favour of urban. Would that be accurate?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. We are reaching out mostly urban churches at the moment. Yeah, we are trying to reach out to rural churches as well, and that's partly why we're putting the resource on rural eco-theology. But I think it will require significantly rethinking some of the questions, because not all the questions in the assessment worksheet will be relevant. Yeah, but I think down the line, there will be something that we'll probably do, probably another korero, especially on rural churches as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Donald's asked, for those who feel comfortable, will a mail list be available? That's not something we've quite considered yet, but we can give that some thought. We would need to just get permission from everyone. I think you're imagining the opportunity to connect with different people who are here tonight, Donald, directly instead of via the core team.
I see I'm not on mute, so yes, that is correct. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. We'll have a think about that and explore ways that we might be able to invite people to do something like that. It is really lovely to be able to connect with different people directly, either in your region or those who you share a particular interest with from within this field. Any other questions?
Kia ora, Amy. Just a straightforward question. Don't forget about the Awhi Mai Awhi Atu book. And also, my question is there a Rosa church in the Pacific? And whether or not have you connected or established with any Pacific in the region, in the Pacific region? Where is it? Is it Fiji, Samoa, Rarotonga?
That is a great question. So Arosha internationally is in 21 countries, I think 22 now, with some other partner organizations. Crystal, do you know if there's any expression of interest from the Pacific at the moment?
I'm not aware of a specific one in Samoa or Fiji or anything. We are kind of networking through some of those regions. The latest has been a conversation in Hawaii. So yeah, where there's a really big church that's kind of invited Arosha to partner with them, but we're still figuring out how we might do that. So I've been involved with a few conversations with them, but we're really keen to network and talk to churches, especially if there's people here that have strong connections back home to the islands. So Arosha's definitely got the Pacific kind of on their radar and hoping to connect with people in those communities.
I love to be part of that. I love to be part of this initiative. I'm thinking, you know, I've been talking to Sylvia about this, and I'm thinking, what about us? You know, our islands are sinking. And here we are not paying attention much about the environment because we're exposed to nature 24/7. We wake up in the morning, nature surrounds us. So that's hence why Pacific people do not pay much attention mentally, intellectually to the environment. But, you know, what's happening now, it's teaching them. People only pay attention to the impact of climate change when it comes to the news. But environmentally, they're not. So I'm very interested in establishing this whakapapa, how we network with this in dialogue, and then we do that mission. How about that? And I'm happy to take that as a next initiative for our whānau and all that.
I just wanted to add that the Pacific Council of Churches is very active on this. I think one of the kind of curious things about our situation in New Zealand is that there are leaders in our Māori and Pacific communities and churches who are very well respected and heard on the international stage, but we're not so good at celebrating them here in Aotearoa. So that's certainly something I'm really passionate about. Yeah.
If you want to contact us, I can definitely do some connecting for you with the international team if you like. And I completely agree with you. I lived in Samoa for 2 years myself, and really keen to kind of help make those connections. So if you want to flick me an email, we can have a chat more.
Yeah, with Sylvia as well, and Amy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ola, that sounds fantastic. It's really lovely to see you again, and I love the passion, and I hope that we can make some progress on that. It might be worth, Sylvia, would you like to just say a couple of words about Awhi Mai, Awhiatu, because Ola has mentioned that tonight, if you're still there.
Sorry, I'm almost asleep. We're currently launching a book which tells the story of 30 women around the country from different cultural backgrounds, Christian women, and it also tells some of the story of Arosha in New Zealand as well. This book is being launched around the country, and in the follow-up email, perhaps you can post my email address if anyone would like to order a copy from me directly.
Great idea. Thank you. All right. Well, okay. Oh, if we've got one more question. Yep, I'll take one more last one there. Is that Wellington Central Baptist? Yeah.
Kia ora, for Christina Ho. Just thinking about the idea of amplifying action and impact, and wondering how much Arosha has or Eco Church have to do with, say, some of the petitions and things that happen around halting, putting a slowdown to the fossil fuel business and so on. And there's such a lot of really good petitions that go around. We were involved here a lot to do with the Zero Carbon Act, along with the Anglican Church here. But we're just wondering how much that is a focus also. Kia ora.
Thank you. I mean, so advocacy, I have to say, it has been actually a key part of my background in this whole area for sort of 10 to 15 years, and it is absolutely important. we don't specifically organise environmental advocacy actions through EcoChurch at the moment, but we're happy to support, and promote things that are happening, initiatives that are taking place already. I think that would probably be fair to say. We have conversations about each of the different initiatives that come up, because there are so many in all the different categories of sustainability and climate change response. So Iris mentioned an upcoming kōrero, which is focusing on the International Plastics Treaty, which essentially that's going to be quite an important one. So we will highlight that, and we will support other advocacy efforts. Like we can pass the word on about them, but we don't directly come up with new initiatives ourselves. Would that be fair to say, Crystal and Iris, or do you want to add anything?
So we are involved with supporting some of the campaigns. So like we're a signatory and a partner on the Free Fairs campaign as well. And we have signed up for various other campaigns that come across our desk. But we don't have a full-time advocacy staff. So what we can do is that if we have volunteers who can help do the research and write petitions. So we do have a few volunteers who do that, especially on topics that are close to their heart. So, for example, we submit petitions on the wetland project, because that's something that many of our local groups are working on, restoring wetlands in their cities. So it's more of a case-by-case basis rather than a full-time person working on advocacy. Yeah.
Just like to reaffirm that it's just really such a key part of the whole philosophy of EcoChurch, that it is a network and a dynamic, organic network, that it's not a top-down organisation. I mean, it's kind of under the umbrella of a Rocha, but EcoChurch is really, we're wanting to enable people to feed in, to energise, and then we can, as you say, amplify that across the network nationally. So it's a great thing just to get involved in and share, as we said, share your passions, contact Iris directly, or Crystal, or myself, or Amy. And it's that's the whole point of being a network.
Beautiful, Sylvia. Thank you. That was well said. Okay. I want to finish us up now officially. Some of us might stay around for a few minutes longer if you have a few other pressing things, and also feel free to write a few things in the chat box or email us. But just to close, I'm going to embarrass you. I was wanting to read a karakia to finish, and there was a beautiful one that I found by Sylvia from the book that she has just mentioned. There are lots of different entries with beautiful karakia in this book, all focusing on creation care. Actually, just before I do that, I'll just tell you what we're going to be doing in the next session, so that you remember to come back next Monday. Among other things, we will be looking at how you use the self-assessment, different ways that you can utilize that tool well, and then choosing those goals and increasing participation at your church, which is always a really key one for people. Once they start things off, they would usually like to get more people involved and integrate it more deeply into the whole of church life. So we'll touch on that. All right, now, thank you all for being here. Let's collect our hearts and minds to focus on God, our Creator. This is actually a blessing. Sorry, not exactly a karakia, but a blessing for us all as we go forward in this work following Jesus. May you know God's call through all your story. May you hear God's word through all your soul. This world matters to me. You matter to me. Jesus is well pleased with you. You will be all right. I am with you. May you feel the embrace of God and so reach out to awhi others. May God bring you friends, young and old, of different cultures, to partner with you in caring for creation. May God stir you with holy fire for our beautiful, fragile world, and sustain you with courage for the challenge. May God give you peace with every breath, a still centre in the building storm. Ke koe te mare o te atua, te ponu o te atua, te ora o te atua. the grace, the truth, and the life of God be yours. Mā te atua koe e manaki. God bless you and keep you, so you will be a blessing to the people and the places you connect with. Amen. Thank you, Sylvia, for that beautiful blessing.